Putin tried to help Trump win the election. US spy chiefs point the finger straight at the Kremlin. Their now declassified report claims the Russian leader ordered a campaign of cyber hacking to influence the outcome as Putin aspired to help Trump by discrediting Hillary Clinton. Spy chiefs say they don't know if the hacking actually affected the outcome of the US election, but it puts Trump in a very difficult position. So how will he respond? Also tonight in Florida, a gunman kills 5 at an airport with a weapon he reportedly carried in his luggage. A system on its knees, the dire warnings over A&E services as winter starts to bite.
Being your First Lady has been the greatest honor of my life, and I hope I've made you proud.
And Michelle's farewell, not a dry eye in the White House as the First Lady makes her last speech.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. Donald Trump has been vociferous, even confrontational, in dismissing allegations that Russian hackers tried to influence the presidential election. So he's going to find it tough, to say the least, to explain tonight's revelations released by America's intelligence agencies. Here's the single sentence in the report that throws everything Mr. Trump has said up until now into doubt. We assess, it says, with high confidence that President Putin did order a hacking campaign to influence the election to help Mr. Trump's chances by discrediting Hillary Clinton. Well, Mr. Trump has already started to backpedal, admitting Russia could be involved, but insisting the election's outcome was not affected. But his presidency has now been engulfed by a storm even before it has begun.
Rarely has a private meeting had such a public, fractious build-up. America's intelligence chiefs came to New York to brief the president-elect on matters of national security. But before they'd even arrived, Donald Trump had dismissed their work as a witch hunt. For days, he's poured scorn on the findings of a report he hadn't seen. Finally, this afternoon, he was shown the files. Some of the detail remains classified, but much of the report was made public this afternoon. Its authors say they have high confidence that Vladimir Putin ordered a campaign to influence the election, that Putin and his government aspired to help Trump's chances by discrediting Hillary Clinton, that hacking operations were conducted against both the Democrats and Republicans, and that the material on the Democrats was given to WikiLeaks, who published it online. Putin is said to have ordered Russian government agencies and state-funded media to influence the campaign. Social media users were allegedly hired to help too. This presents Mr. Trump with something of a problem. Having backed Putin very publicly recently, he seems to have been persuaded by his intelligence officials. He issued a conciliatory statement this afternoon. I had a constructive meeting and conversation with the leaders of the intelligence community this afternoon, he said, quickly pointing out that hacking had had absolutely no effect on the outcome of the election, including the fact that there was no tampering whatsoever with voting machines. We need to aggressively combat and stop cyber attacks, he said. I'll appoint a team to give me a plan within 90 days of taking office. So, a cessation of hostilities, but the very fact that the president-elect picked a fight with the people who provide his eyes and ears on the world has been a serious cause for concern here.
This is just unheard of and unprecedented, and I think we all have to be concerned about this. This is not the kind of bickering that ought to be going on in public.
And Mr. Trump's tweet first, talk later policy prompted this blunt message from the outgoing vice president today.
Grow up, Donald. Grow up. Time to be an adult. You're president.
But there's little to indicate Donald Trump is about to change. The ballots confirming his election win were brought to Congress today and ratified. He'll take office in exactly 2 weeks' time, with the issue of Russia looming large, no doubt, at the top of his in-tray.
Well, Martin's in Washington tonight and joins us now. Martin, these revelations on the very day that Congress finally formally certified Donald Trump's election victory.
Indeed, Julie. And you know what's really got under Donald Trump's skin here, I think, is the notion that people might think that he didn't win this election fair and square. That may be what this whole thing has been about. He was desperate to nail that down. And it was front and centre of that statement he made this afternoon. There was no evidence to suggest that the outcome of the election was influenced. And to be fair to Mr. Trump, that's exactly what these intelligence officials told Congress when they were laying out their case to them yesterday. But then in a statement today, the report's authors said that they specifically did not make an assessment of the impact that these activities had on the outcome of the election. So everybody may well want this just to go away, to disappear, this situation now. But that question still hangs, as does the question of Mr. Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin, this bromance that was brewing, this mutual appreciation society. Remember, just last week, Barack Obama implemented a whole new series of sanctions on Russia. And there was a thought that Donald Trump may, when he takes office, revoke these, rein them in. Now, that's going to be very difficult now. He has grudgingly accepted this afternoon that Vladimir Putin did have a hand in the hacking to try and influence the election. He can't be seen to be too close to him anymore.
And of course, everybody's been watching the running commentary that Donald Trump has provided on his Twitter account. Do you think you'll have learned any lessons about his social media use from his experience in the last 24 hours?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it's exhausting just to watch his social media account. It starts often before 7 o'clock in the morning, the tweeting, and it goes on into the night. Just this week, he's aimed blows at a whole series of motor companies, a whole series of broadcasters. He's had a go at North Korea. He's had a go at China. He's had a go at the opponents of Israel. This afternoon, he picked a fight with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've no idea how he finds the time to do it in the schedule that he's got. He says this works. A couple of these tweets at car manufacturers, directed specifically at car manufacturers this week, were followed up by statements from those firms that they changed policy. They weren't going to send jobs to Mexico anymore. They'd keep them in the States. So he'll say it works. It's a direct line as well for the American people to the thoughts of their president. He'll say that's important. And he's cast himself as the maverick, the outsider. He'll say this is what he's all about. But it's got him into trouble today. It's got him into trouble before. The tweets are often inaccurate. Sometimes they're inconsistent. Will he have learned anything from this? Possibly not. Don't expect the tweeting to stop.
Martin, thank you very much indeed. Well, barely a fortnight before he takes office, there was as grim an illustration as possible this evening of the kind of security issues that will face Donald Trump's presidency. 5 people were killed and at least 8 others wounded in a gun attack at one of America's major airports. It happened without warning in the baggage reclaim area of Fort Lauderdale International Airport in Florida. It's believed the gunman, who apparently had US military identification, had travelled with his weapon in his checked-in baggage.
At one of Florida's busiest airports, thousands of passengers swarm out from terminal buildings, desperately looking for safety, running for their lives. For a gunman has just opened fire inside the baggage reclaim area of Terminal 2 at Fort Lauderdale Airport.
Airport is completely shut down right now. No flights landing, no flights taking off. Of course, that makes complete sense because of what we're seeing right now, people running across the runway.
Police SWAT teams arrive as a major operation swings into action. Inside baggage reclaim, the horrific aftermath of the shooting. With reports of a second gunman, the chaos continued.
The airport is under great security at this time. What happened here right now, I don't know what just happened here at our terminal right now. So right now the door is closed.
Police say the attacker arrived on a flight with a gun in a checked-in bag. After he claimed his luggage, he went into the toilets, loaded the weapon, then emerged shooting. When he finished, he threw down his gun and was arrested.
We have the shooter in custody. He's unharmed. No law enforcement fired any shots. The subject is being interviewed by a team of FBI agents.
The authorities say they responded as best they could.
We've suspended operations at the airport for the time being. We're working together with all the law enforcement to address all the needs and concerns of the passengers that are inside the building and on airplanes right now. They are all sheltered in place.
There are reports the gunman was carrying a military ID, but it's not yet clear whether it was his, as investigations continue. Neil Connery, News at 10.
Now, another winter, another crisis for the NHS, but the trouble is they seem to get worse every year. According to the latest figures, NHS hospitals in England are under pressure like never before. Last month, A&E departments had to close to new patients more than 100 times because they simply couldn't cope. A third of all English hospital trusts triggered official alerts because of the sheer pressure on their resources. It all paints a picture of a service close to breaking point.
They're geared to deal with our emergencies, but now A&Es across England are so full, dozens are declaring their own. Winter demand forcing them to close their doors to focus on patients already inside. Last week, hospitals like Colchester turned away record numbers. With no beds spare at all, patients here were already sitting in corridors before they closed the A&E to new arrivals.
So certainly the past couple of weeks have been the worst that I've seen in terms of the holiday period and the post-holiday period in hospitals and indeed right across the system. So we're seeing increased pressure in primary care, ambulance, social care, community care, but also most crucially for me, the hospitals. It's as bad as it's ever been.
In total, the latest figures show A&E departments in England closed 143 times to new patients in December, up 63% on the previous year. While out of 152 hospital trusts, 55 issued alerts and had to take urgent action to cope with demand. And in the worst cases, 8 were unable to give patients comprehensive care.
Our departments are overcrowded to a state where patients who normally would transition up to a medical ward in 4 to 6 hours are now waiting 8, 10, 12, 16 hours on a trolley in the emergency department. And that's unacceptable, it's undignified, and we need to do better.
Today it was revealed that 2 patients died at Worcester Royal Hospital waiting for hours on trolleys. One from an aneurysm, the other a cardiac arrest, though the Trust says there's no evidence of a link to winter pressures. And in Wales, ambulances were seen queuing outside this hospital in Cardiff, with several trusts asking people to avoid using A&E if they can. NHS England is telling me tonight that hospitals like this one are stretched but stable, that they're coping. They say beds weren't actually as full this Christmas as last year, and that their winter plan is tried and tested. But tested is exactly how many hospitals are currently feeling. And at the Royal Lancaster, they say the pressure isn't just down to the numbers coming in, but the numbers they can't get back out.
I think we've seen an increase in patients who are fit enough to go home, but who we can't send home because there isn't a place for them either in a nursing home or residential care home, or they haven't got the resources at home to manage. That's been increasing over the last few years.
The Red Cross says the problem's becoming a humanitarian crisis and has been called in to help at other hospitals. So wherever you are this winter, the chances are you'll face a long wait at your local A&E, and that's if you're not sent to wait elsewhere. Paul Brand, News at 10.
As we've already seen tonight, there's little doubting the influence Russia's president now has on global politics, and there was certainly no secrecy when Russia intervened in Syria in 2015. President Putin clearly wanted the world to know about it. So today he was just as keen to announce that his forces are now starting to withdraw from Syria. But whether this means an end to Russian military presence there is another question altogether.
There are some questions over whether Russia's rather rickety aircraft carrier is still capable of waging war, but Moscow thinks it's done enough. After a few months in the eastern Mediterranean, the carrier fleet set a course for home today. In accordance with instructions from President Putin, said the chief of the General Staff, Russia's military presence in Syria will be downsized. The Russians have been involved in the fighting in Syria for nearly 2 years, and there's no question that their bombs have changed the course of the war. They wanted to shore up the regime of their great ally, President Bashar al-Assad, and that's what they've done. He's stronger now than he's ever been since the war began. His authority most recently and brutally asserted in his recapture of Aleppo last month. The president's most powerful supporter is now signalling that it's ready for talks.
It's a sign of a goodwill on the part of the Kremlin because of the upcoming peace conference on Syria in Astana in Kazakhstan, which is being prepared. And secondly, for the domestic audience, Putin wants to show that the plan on Syria that he had has been partially, or at least, carried out.
Russia established an air base in government-held territory in 2015, from which it carried out near daily airstrikes. It also has a naval base in Tartus. In October, the carrier fleet arrived off the Syrian coast, the Admiral Kuznetsov, accompanied by destroyers and submarines. Russia's army has also taken casualties in Syria, but the number of soldiers on the ground has always been unclear. What's also unclear is whether this will be a real withdrawal. Moscow made a similar statement 9 months ago.
Just like in the past when Russia declared withdrawing troops back in March 2016, that was followed up with intensification of its airstrike campaign, it is likely that we're going to see the same scenario repeated now.
Talks on Syria begin later this month, and while the Admiral Kuznetsov chugs slowly home, Russia's military withdrawal from Syria will be an even more gradual process. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
There are warnings tonight that 40,000 jobs could be at risk if Britain loses its Formula One Grand Prix. Last night we reported how the owners of the Silverstone track are considering dropping the event after 2019 because it makes a loss. Well, Formula One's boss Bernie Ecclestone told us today that if Silverstone pulls out, Britain could lose the Grand Prix for a year, and it's a racing certainty that that would have a massive impact.
Ever since just after the Second World War, the British Grand Prix has been an immovable fixture. Memories of Stirling Moss around the circuit at Aintree, countless home winners at Brands Hatch and at Silverstone, a tradition that continued as recently as last summer. But now the man running Formula One warns that this piece of the British sporting summer might temporarily be missing.
We're not going to lose Formula One in Great Britain.
There will be a British Grand Prix, always.
Maybe we'll have to be a year without it, but normally we're going to be all right. We don't want to lose it at Silverstone, for sure. So we'll have to see exactly what's happening or what their problems are.
ITV News revealed yesterday that Silverstone, where Lewis Hamilton won again last summer, is losing millions of pounds in holding the Grand Prix and is threatening to pull out for good. That's one thing, but for Formula One's boss to now say there may be no British race at all, it's huge. There's been one here every year since 1948. The former world champion Damon Hill told us tonight that the sports governing body, the FIA, have got a responsibility to help promote the circuits and could do more in terms of cash. But as a national sport, it should qualify for some sort of contribution from the country. There is, however, no indication that the government will step in financially, though they do say they would be prepared to meet Silverstone's owners. But the absence of a British race, even the once, could do real economic harm.
There's no doubt there are thousands of jobs, high-quality engineering jobs, that are related to Formula One and Silverstone. If that, during the Crown, was removed, then it could put at jeopardy thousands of engineering jobs. There is no doubts about that.
Intriguingly, Ecclestone claims that the two potential replacement venues are not both traditional racing circuits, which brings the possibility of action on the streets of London or on a proposed circuit in Wales that's yet to be built a touch closer. Richard Pallow, News at 10.
Britain's triple Tour de France champion Chris Froome told us today he was offered a banned steroid under the terms of a permitted medical exemption, but refused it on personal moral grounds. His predecessor as Tour de France winner, Sir Bradley Wiggins, had been given a similar drug under the same rules of a permitted exemption for medical reasons. There's no suggestion he did anything wrong, but this is the latest twist in a saga dogging British cycling.
Chris Froome wants to be remembered as one of the greats, but with Team Sky currently under investigation and engulfed in controversy, does he feel his remarkable success so far is tainted and his ambition is unobtainable?
Not at all. I think my values have always been very clear to everyone, and I've always been very open with the media and the public, and I think everyone knows exactly where I stand in that regard.
At the end of last year, it emerged Froome's former teammate, Sir Bradley Wiggins, received banned steroid injections before 3 major races, including his 2012 Tour de France win. He did nothing wrong. He'd been given medical exemptions each time. But Froome told me in Monaco today that during his second Tour victory, he was offered a similar exemption for steroids. He refused on moral grounds.
In 2015, I got into the last week of the Tour, and yes, I was struggling with inflammation in my chest, and certainly there was medication that could have helped me with that inflammation to breathe normally again. But I didn't feel going into that last week of the Tour it didn't sit comfortably with me, so I declined it. I said no.
Until the UK Anti-Doping Agency concludes its inquiry, suspicions will inevitably continue. Regardless, Froome is convinced he's now part of a clean and trustworthy team.
Yes. I mean, of course, there are always going to be people who are cheating, but I can speak for what I'm doing, and certainly the people around me, I've got no reason to doubt any of them.
Froome is determined that whatever he ends up achieving can never be taken away, unlike many others who disgraced the yellow jersey during cycling's darkest days. Steve Scott, News at 10, Monaco.
Now, in the midst of our crowded and busy lives, there is a chronic condition that is often unseen and unheard and causes untold damage to the mental and physical health of growing numbers of people. It's called loneliness. And charities like Age UK say loneliness is affecting more elderly people than ever before. Well, figures show that 500,000 people over the age of 60 spend most days completely alone without visits or telephone calls, while 3.9 million older people say the TV is their main form of company. And this loneliness can have added health implications like depression and sleep problems. The charity says it is as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. One lady who lost her husband 5 years ago gave us her account of a life of loneliness.
Dear Tom, I nursed him for a year until he went into the sewer with cancer and died. After then, I was here on my own. You got nobody to talk to. Nobody to talk to. And as I say, I can't get out there to go and talk to anybody. So, get up and get myself my cup of tea and breakfast, and then I'll come and wallow on here for the next couple of hours, and then time getting the television on, and then I think to myself, oh my goodness me, what's the time? 9 o'clock. I better get ready to go to bed again. When the weather was good, I'd sit out on my garden seat for hours just watching the birds and listening to the birds, or watching the trees and that sort of thing. But then when it comes to this sort of weather, it's a bit depressing. Then I don't speak to anybody unless my family rings me for a reason. It is lonely.
Doris Muse speaking there to us earlier today, and Doris is being helped by a charity called Silver Line, who take her once a week to a social club. And we've more information on organisations that can help ease loneliness on our website. That's at itv.com/news. Now, the actor Om Puri shot to fame here as the star of the cult British movie East is East. His portrayal of a family patriarch who runs a fish and chip shop with his English wife won him many fans and a BAFTA nomination. So his death from a heart attack, which was announced today, prompted floods of tributes from his co-stars. But Om Puri's fame reached far beyond these shores. In India, where he died at the age of 66, he was a Bollywood megastar.
Here, eat. I'm going to hell, but not with your death on my soul.
This brief appearance in Gandhi was enough to make the world sit up and notice Om Puri.
Hi, very good. Thank you for asking.
Soon, this established star of Indian cinema was much in demand in the West too, winning huge acclaim for the hit British film East is East, in which he played a Pakistani father in Yorkshire, dealing with a clash of cultures.
Salim. Why you know wear suit I buy for you to wear in college?
I mean, it's in the cleanest time.
How do you get job as engineer dressed like a bloody hippie?
I then realised
how famous he was. When we were filming a scene in Southall, suddenly somebody came from round the corner and shouted, "En Paris! En Paris!" And then people started coming out of all the buildings. And then the next thing was we had a crowd, and then cars started stopping on the main road, and everyone was getting out of the cars to try and get a glimpse of En Paris.
With his famous craggy features and intensity, En Paris had begun his acting career in Indian art house cinema, but was soon picking up national film awards in some of Bollywood's most critically acclaimed films.
While Soviet helicopters are killing everything they can find.
Hollywood roles would soon follow. This was En Paris' final completed film, Viceroy's House, about Indian independence.
What brings you to Delhi?
I have great expectations.
It's due out in March, and its director, Gurinder Chadha, who made Bend It Like Beckham, said they'd wanted to work together for years.
Well, there are very few Indian actors who can work in India and in Britain and in the rest of the world. It's a small club, and En Paris was definitely one of them. I feel bereft that I'm not going to be able to sit with him and enjoy our work.
Every time I look, you sitting with Annie, talking, smoking, smoking, talking.
Cinema in the East or West, that En Paris created such an impact in both, will be his lasting legacy.
The film star En Paris, who's died at the age of 66. And finally, few would argue that Michelle Obama has made an extraordinary impact as First Lady, and in a tearful final speech in that role today, she gave a message of hope for America. Her global profile since she became into the limelight as the wife of President Obama at times even seemed to outshine her husband's. She possesses no shortage, of course, of star quality, but her gifts as a speaker gave her a genuinely substantial public presence. When Michelle Obama talked, the world often listened. And it is as a role model to young people that she made a special name for herself. So it was appropriate, perhaps, that with her parting words, her voice breaking with emotion, she thanked them for their faith in her.
We're almost at the end.
Her last words as First Lady, and they were familiar ones. While America still deals with deep division, Michelle Obama was talking hope and the need for unity.
You see, our glorious diversity, our diversities of faiths and colors and creeds, that is not a threat to who we are. It makes us who we are.
She did not mention Donald Trump by name today, but during the election campaign was the most effective voice against him.
When someone is cruel or acts like a bully, you don't stoop to their level. No, our motto is, when they go low, we go high.
Michelle Obama transformed the role of First Lady, supporting her husband through 2 bruising terms and using the platform to champion her own causes. Education was her passion, her message to the young expressed in rap. Michelle Obama developed a special bond with the Mulberry School in East London, visiting it to launch her global initiative, Let Girls Learn. Today, pupils who met the First Lady in London and later visited her in the White House talked of her lasting impact.
You know, they say never meet your heroes, but with Michelle Obama, that's totally not the case. She's just amazing, and meeting her made her that much more inspirational, because you see that she's just a normal person.
I think the world will miss her so much, but I know that still she's going to be carrying on this work because she's just such an amazing woman.
Fittingly, Michelle Obama's tearful last speech was delivered to a White House room full of educators who've worked on her campaigns.
So I want to close today by simply saying thank you. Thank you for everything you do for our kids and for our country. Being your First Lady has been the greatest honor of my life, and I hope I've made you proud. Thank you.
Run for the presidency, an option she has ruled out. But the campaigns closest to her heart will continue after the White House, she promises. Paul Davis, News at 10.
And before we go, a couple of stories coming up this weekend. We'll see Hollywood's first big film and TV awards ceremony on Sunday, with British hopes pinned on the TV drama The Night Manager at the Golden Globes. And Manchester City's 5-0 thumping of West Ham tonight was the curtain raiser for one of football's traditional big weekends, the FA Cup third round. Some of the minnows left in the cup will be hoping to do a bit better than the Hammers. But that is it for now. Tom's here on Monday. Till then, good night. Have a great weekend.